Hi there, everybody, and whether you're watching this just pre-holidays or perhaps the New Year's has passed already. My name's Scott Armstrong. I'm one of the managers at the Academy, and today we are talking about mental wellness. And as you can see on the screen, we have a rather robust panel about talking mental wellness. On my right, I'm not sure, we got Brian Ramsay, who's your executive director, and Brian's in Toronto right now. Jason is on the other side, and Jason is another program manager and works with the CFLPA offices. And we're so grateful to have joining us today is Dr. Adrienne Toogood, who works with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and mental wellness. She's our expert today on mental wellness, and working with her through Winnipeg is Dallas Ludwick as well. And so thank you all for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having us. We're looking forward to the conversation.
All right. So this is meant to be a conversation that we're going to have. And Dr. Toogood, I'd just like to toss it over to you to just start it out. Mental wellness. I saw today that one of the Swedish goaltenders in the NHL has decided to withdraw from Olympic competition, Robin, because of mental wellness issues. And a couple of years ago, this would have almost been unheard of. We heard Naomi Osaka withdraw from tennis and other athletes as well. Why are we hearing so much more about mental wellness over the last little while?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think, as you've mentioned, people maybe are more comfortable being honest about it. And I also think that, we've been in a global pandemic. And I think as a result, it's required that the world talks about it more because humans are not mentally well all the time right now. And so I think just that increased stress has impacted everyone. And for athletes, like members of the CFL Players Association, they're professional athletes as well. And we're having this conversation regardless of when they watch it during Grey Cup week. And so, when we look at the emotional demands on athletes, there's incredible highs and incredible lows, and that will also impact emotional well-being. Good for the Swedish goaltender and good for athletes. Carey Price is a Canadian athlete who also decided to go get some assistance. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and things affect us, and we have to learn how to deal with those strong emotions that we have, or it's not sustainable.
And Brian, you're on a front line with the members as well and seeing these things. What have you seen in terms of trends over the last little while?
I think, as Dr. Toogood said, we're starting to see somewhat of a culture shift in our locker rooms. It's being more accepted to talk about it, and the highs and lows is something that just jumped out at me. As Dr. Toogood said, the highs and lows that you go through in a regular season, preseason training camp, or through a career in professional sport, and specifically with our members in the CFL, there's quite a number of them each year, each week, each month. And I think what we're seeing now more than ever is these conversations. We're having these types of conversations. We're having smaller conversations within the teams, and we're trying to foster that environment so that our members know that there's resources available for them, whichever way they're comfortable to use them.
Is it possible, this is just an open question, is it possible that players don't recognize mental stressors at all as mental stressors? And if that's possible, what are some of the things that, Dr. Toogood, with the Blue Bombers and Brian, with the different members, do you see players coming to you with that they may recognize as stressors or just make attribute it to something else?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I think there's a cultural component. I think that, athletes are known to be tough. And it's a bit tricky then to recognize when things are stressing you. I like to use the term mental or emotional injury. We can get injured emotionally just like we can get injured physically. I think there's that part. And then I also think it depends on what people have learned about mental health over the course of their lifetime and how they've seen other people respond and react. The other piece related to the pandemic that I think is really important, it's obviously, a balancing point. I read this one thing and they were talking about kind of the personal sustainability index, which sounds like really complicated, but it's really just like what keeps you going, and we're all different. We all have different things that fill our tanks. And so when you think of some of the members, you have some members who for the first time are playing and their families aren't with them because of COVID protocols, challenges getting them here. And so then you have these micro touch points of keeping them well when they get to go home with their family. You also have players who, can't socialize as much or go out in the community and get away from football. And so all those things, I think, contribute to kind of this mental wellness picture. So I think that it's tricky sometimes to allow ourselves to notice that we're not mentally well and we just kind of plug through. And we might have gotten through before, but now we're having a bit more trouble getting through because it's hard right now. And we don't have as much recovery in our lives.
If I could add something to that, I would say that, pro athletes, they have a lot of amazing qualities that the public and the fans really admire. They're passionate, they're goal oriented, and they're super, super dedicated. Those are amazing strengths, and they wouldn't get to where they are without those qualities. And I think just now we're starting to realize a bit, like anything, too much, being so invested, being so giving everything that you have to something can also have a downside. It can get in the way. And, I know Adrienne and I believe strongly that, at its core, mental health is just developing an understanding of who you are, not necessarily as an athlete, but as a human too. And I hope that the conversation around athletes is shifting from not just their athletic performance to them as a whole human as well.
And when we're seeing more and more, I think from a player perspective, you've been taught not to talk about it. You've been taught in any injury, if it's a shoulder or a knee, you've been taught to push it to the side and stay on the field. And it's okay to play through things. And we talk about that with our active members and former members, and we're learning more and more. But it's also okay to talk about them and strengthen them, no different than you go to the gym to train your upper body or lower body. You're just training a different part of your body. And I think within the locker room, sometimes it's difficult to see because it's not a tangible injury like a knee or a shoulder with a crutch or a sling or something like that. And I think more and more now with these conversations, and you're seeing, Scott, you had mentioned other sports speaking out. We've had some of our members be leaders in this area and start to talk about that. And that just breeds confidence throughout the membership to know that this is okay to talk about.
So I'm a member, and how do I do a self-diagnosis? How do I know where I'm at? Brian, I know you've had experience within the locker room, Adrienne and Dallas, and Jason as well. What are some clues or things that I can do to self-check to see where I'm at?
Well, it's interesting. The New Zealand All Blacks, they have kind of a process where they talk about either being a red head or a green head. And they talk about the fact that when they're a green head, that means they're emotionally in control. And it really goes back to what Dallas said, that we're human beings first and we're built like human beings. And, so they sort of understand, what it means to be a green head, what kinds of things they need to stay green. And they literally talk to each other on the field and say, hey, you're a redhead. Because when you're a redhead, you're not going to be a good teammate. You're going to overreact to things. You're going to do things that don't make sense based on the play that's unfolding in front of you. So I kind of taken that concept and combined it with something from the Canadian Mental Health Association, where they have this idea of a mental health meter, because I think that's an excellent question. How do you know what you're physically well? We know, oh, my shoulder's a little tight. We understand. We just sort of non-judgmentally evaluate our body, and we understand what our body needs so that we can keep our body well, so we can keep going and stay on the field of play. And so the mental health continuums, something where, we've divided it into 3 sections. The kind of like the red light, the amber light, the green light. When it's a green light, you go. When it's amber, you're sort of cautious. And when it's a red light, you have to slow down and check it out. And on there are a number of different symptoms that might be associated with. So, for example, if you're sitting in a player meeting and you're just having you're just having trouble taking it in, you're a bit foggy. That might be an indication that you're not necessarily in the green light area, right? Like something's going on. There's too much on your mind. Maybe you didn't play well last game and that's still with you. Or maybe for you, your sleep gets affected. You're not sleeping as well. You're up all night. You're waking up. You're having trouble falling asleep. There's all sorts of things that we can associate with mental wellness that we don't even think about because we're used to just keep going. So the idea is to start to check in with yourself in terms of where you are. And imagine if you wake up in the morning, you checked in, you're like, where am I at? And you're like, oh, I'm pretty green light. You know what? If you're having a green light day, you can head to practice and have a great practice. If you're in the amber light, if you get tough feedback today from a teammate or a coach, it's probably going to impact you a certain way. You're going to have to be intentional about working through that and thinking about when you've played well and really building yourself up, because you're going to be a little bit more sensitive today. And you know what? If you don't pay attention and you go through several days like that, at the end of the week, you might not be sleeping as well, And so it's really that idea of sustainability. And again, there's, everyone's different. As Dallas mentioned, everyone's a human being first. Everyone's different in terms of what they need to stay well. Everyone's different in terms of what throws them off. And everyone's different in terms of what the symptoms are that show up first that say that you are not mentally well, just like everyone's body is different. And so I think that that's really important. And it's a good idea to like kind of find a way to proactively pay attention to where you're at so you can work to stay well.
Brian, if you were to put on a player's hat, and go back a few years, was there any sort of check-ins that you would have done for yourself there? And feel free to defer this comment because as Adrienne said, this is a very individualized kind of approach. But was it something that you did, or how did you deal with that kind of topic?
I would like to think I did. I'm not sure if I did though. I don't think that we the conversations that we're having today now weren't conversations that necessarily were had a number of years ago, and even just a few years ago. So there, as Adrienne was saying, there's different ways to understand your body, no different than you understand if your knee is sore and you're heading into a practice, and you treat it differently if your shoulder's sore, or you tape up a wrist or a hand if you're going into a game or practice. You would hope that you did things like this, but looking back, there's obviously ways to do it better. And I think part of these discussions we're having, part of the resources through the academy, and part of the resources that we're seeking to have unilaterally across the CFL at every club and through the league office, is to make sure that these checkpoints are well known by everybody through our membership, through the staff at the teams. Because I do know if I was doing them, I probably wasn't doing them the right way.
Fair enough. So Brian, just to keep going on that one, now that we're in 2021, 22 going on there, what can you share about the evolution, of when you were a player versus now, of the conversations that are maybe starting to be had in the locker room, or people reaching out because they're recognizing that this is something, as Adrienne, you said, just like physical wellness, you got to take care of that. Are you seeing any difference in behavior in sort of the membership?
Yeah, no, we are, and we're seeing more members reach out, which is just a great thing to have the conversations and to talk about that. But I think we're also seeing more of our members try and be proactive in terms of checking on their teammates and checking and working with their families, and even in their communities where our members have such strong relationships. And that's becoming the norm. So if it was the outlier before of the person that wanted to reach out, and that was probably the hard part to do it, because you would have been the outlier. Now you're seeing it'll be, I think everyone would like it to be the outlier of the person that's not comfortable, because so many people in that whole community are it's just common practice to do. And we're seeing our members be leaders in this. And I know Adrienne could speak to the individual work at the team level and how much that group has embraced it. And I think that club has been really setting the bar in terms of how they treat it, and how they treat it as not just an individual wellness tool, but a team wellness tool as well, which is very important in a team sport, especially at professional level. How those, to use the analogy that Dr. Toogood just used, the red light, green light, and how that affects the team. And if you're repeatedly red lights, and what that impact has on your teammates around you. Does it bring them down into the red? Does it affect the team and things like that? So with this sort of culture change, and I hope we're just really on the cusp of it. And I think we're going to see even more of our members be leaders in this area for themselves individually, but for those around them as well.
There is some attention being paid to it, because people are also realizing that it does have a huge impact on performance. Ideally, we want to see mental health as valuing the human and valuing them outside of their performance on the field. At the same time, valuing the whole human and taking care of the whole human improves their performance on the field. If you think about the difference, if you were in a green light space or a red light space, while something was happening, like dealing with a last minute change to the lineup, or, an injury or media scrutiny, getting that tough feedback, as Adrienne had mentioned earlier, either from a teammate or from a coach, the headspace that you're in that moment will affect you dramatically, and, how you handle it. And it will also probably affect performance, which then affects the rest of the team and what everybody's trying to achieve.
I like, Brian, how you brought it, not just self-analysis, but also taking a look at, at your team members and helping them out. Adrienne, are there some sort of tips or strategies? If I see somebody who's in that red light space, how do we broach these very sensitive areas to try to get everybody moving in a good direction?
Yeah, that's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Jason has
Because
the
everyone's
ability
so
to edit
individual.
this out.
Isn't red
Adrienne, can I ask? You froze up there for a second. Just
Yeah,
as you asked it was a beautiful timing. You said it was a tough question. You disappeared. I thought that
that's
was very
right.
skillful on your
That's
part.
the way you should do it. Is if a teammate's that way, you should actually leave, right? So that you can just not be part of it because it's hard. No,
That's our cliffhanger. That's part 2 right there.
Love it.
absolutely.
But yeah,
Um,
please, yeah, we can start even from Scott's point.
yeah. I would say that I guess the way I'm going to answer that question might be a little bit different, but it was interesting. Brene Brown has this wonderful clip where she talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy. And she said, empathy is not about running to turn the lights off. It's about having the courage to sit with someone in the dark. And so I think a really important thing about that is recognizing that you might not be able to fix the issue. It's not about making someone better. It's about helping someone know that they're not alone if they're in that red place, and sitting with someone in it, and, caring for them. There's so many examples in the sport of football. And sometimes it is, if you're in a playoff game, for example, and you see a player get injured and you see how devastating that is for them. And then you see the player come over and just be with that person. They're not going to make it better, but they know that they're not alone in it. And so I think that's very important. And I think that, recognizing that everyone has different things that they find helpful, and at different points in time when they want to chat about it and make it better, and ultimately that person has to make that decision for themselves. So I think it's difficult if you don't have a relationship with someone already, if they're really struggling, to necessarily walk in and say, hey, what's happening, can I help you? You might not get a very good response, shall we say. But if you know the guy a little bit more in advance of that, I think it's a much easier conversation to have.
So let's say I'm in the locker room, or I'm even at home, Brian, and I'm getting to that place of, where are the different reach out points that members can go to get some assistance. So sort of, I'm watching this webcast, I want to have some assistance. How do I go about doing that?
Yeah, and well, we have some through the academy right now. We have some through LifeWorks and our EAP programs. Some of the teams we've talked a lot today about Adrienne's work with Winnipeg specifically. Some of the teams are setting the bar in terms of having those internal resources as well. And we're working throughout the CFL to make sure that those resources exist on every club, as they do in Winnipeg, as an example. And for some clubs, they already do. But it's about harmonizing them and not having a barrier to a resource. So if the player is comfortable calling the Players Association, that's okay. If they're comfortable going through the team, if they want to go through the league, if they want to go through somebody else, just to ensure that they know that that resource is there. And we've really started about 5 or 6 years ago through the academy. We've increased that with LifeWorks joining on just 3 years ago in Morneau Chappelle. But I don't think that we're at that end yet. We've got to continue to have those touch points, so our members know, and their dependents and their families, because we haven't really touched on that, but and how expansive that is in their whole environment. They know that there are resources out there for them to call, and it's an email, it's a phone call, it's a video chat now, something we're all more comfortable with coming through these last 2 years. And there isn't a spot where they can't seek help.
Fair enough. Adrienne, anything that you want to add to that?
No, I love what he said about having a variety of options, because everyone has a different comfort level with different things, and and so I like that there's a number of different options. And I agree. I think there are several teams that have someone associated with them, and players. It's all relationship based. I guess that's the number one thing I'd say too, is to a player that's looking to get some help in this area. And the thing that's the most important is that you feel comfortable with the person you're talking with, so that you can be honest about it and you feel supported in what you're saying. And that's the thing that's going to lead to the best results. So, to that player, find someone that you feel comfortable talking with, and then that's the best person for you.
Fair enough. And as we're recording this in sort of early part of December, just before Grey Cup, that non-stressful season of the holidays is coming up where stress just disappears for everybody. And of course, I'm being entirely facetious on that, but thinking about the holiday season and how to cope with mental wellness too, Adrienne, I was just going to lean on you a little bit too. Just, is there any things that we can do to take extra care in what traditionally is a pretty stressful season for a lot of people?
Yeah, and I think it depends a little bit on how you're coming into that season as well. Part A is it's been for all athletes, it's been a bit more stressful in general just because of the global pandemic and the more restrictions and all that. So you might be coming in a bit more tired. You also might be coming in on a really positive note, or you might have underperformed this season. And so I think that giving yourself a little bit of space to check in with yourself with where you're at and then what you need. And I think learning ways to communicate to the people around you what you need as well. That can be tough to do. So quite honestly, letting people know ahead of time, because everyone, people in their life want to help them out, and they just don't know what to say sometimes. So kind of letting them know where you're at and what you need from them. And, one of the conversations Dallas and I had was this idea around understanding what fills your cup, or what fills your gas tank, and so everyone's different. That whole knowing who you are thing is really important, even in this standpoint too. And so imagine if you go into Christmas and even the off season, just with that idea of understanding what fills your tank and making sure you do lots of that to kind of re-energize and get yourself back emotionally and physically. Because I think, again, we understand the physical wellness part. This season, a football season in particular, really beats your body up. And you go in there knowing that you got to rehab and get your body well again so it can handle the load of the next season. And so, again, I just love to toss in that mental well-being piece as well. And, it may have beaten you up a little bit emotionally as well. And so what are you going to do to kind of get yourself ready so you can tolerate the load of the next season with all the stuff that you can and you can't control as a professional athlete?
Fair enough. Appreciate that. Any other tips from go, Brian?
I think, yeah, sorry, Scott. No, I just think Adrienne said something that jumped out at me. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, as she noted in professional sports now, they're just different stressors at different times. So in season brings the highs and lows of the specific practices and games. And as we get out of the season, now you're starting to think about, where am I contractually? How did I perform this last season? What do I need to prepare for next season? Am I coming off of a longer term injury? Am I needing a surgery required? Where am I at, most importantly, with my family and that dynamic? And am I moving back home? Am I not moving home? Am I moving around? All these different pieces. And one of the things that I've seen even more so in the last few years is that stress is constant. It's just different stresses, but at a different time of year. And as you get into at the professional sport level, that you're constantly competing for a job, and that's the reality of it. And I think everyone understands that. But that challenge is a bit different in January, February, March, when you're competing for a job, but you physically can't go to practice and perform to show everyone where you're competing for a job. So it's a bit of a different stress because you're working on your own in a silo, training, recuperating, regenerating your body for this next season, knowing that you're going to go right back into competition. So there are different elements to the year. And we see that even in the quieter years or months of football, December, January, February, those can be some of the most stressful months as you're going into the unknown of that following season.
I love that. And I often talk about this idea of kind of like remember and forgive, right? So if your head's still in the last season and you're having trouble forgiving yourself or moving on from things, then you're not allowing yourself to recover. And it's really important to have a process in place so that you can learn and let go. Another thing that I often talk about is the fact that your head's not always in the present moment. You can ruminate and you can even, we haven't even talked about the fact that all this is happening in the public eye in the era of social media, right? And so sometimes you can move on from something, but others don't, and they continue to bring it back. And there's clips of you out there, and it can be something that you're quite embarrassed about, or you even feel shame around, and you're better than that. And so that's a whole other layer of emotional injury that can happen nowadays as well. And so again, the brain's not always present. Sometimes the season's over, but it's not over in your mind, and it's really important to recognize that and to find a way to come to peace with it, really, and to let it go. And you have to find a place to put all that emotion and work through it so that you can get better for the next season. So anyways, that was going around in my head as I heard you talk.
And I've got to take the bait there, Adrienne, that's too much of a point to pass up. How do I let the good, the bad, and the ugly that has just happened in the past season go so that I can regenerate? What are some tips and tricks that you could offer the players?
Yeah, absolutely. So I alluded to that idea of remember and forgive. And I often will I really like that mentality of, standing on the foundation of past performance. And I think that we have to take that step back and recognize that it's all part of the story of whatever our potential will become. And we really have to, learn and get better. And so in terms of processes, I'm a firm believer in just like having processes in place to keep your body well, whether it's everyone has their routine that works for their specific body. I think there's a lot of process to keep yourself mentally well also. So one tangible example of that is kind of rolling out your brain and doing what they call mindfulness training, which is really just allowing your brain to rest, and if you do that, 3 times a week for 12 to 50 minutes a time, we know that your brain's going to allow yourself to let go of that stuff a little bit better. I think that for guys, even having a note file on your phone where if there's a loop that's going on, a lot, just getting it out, what's going on, what loop am I caught in a little bit, writing stuff down. Some people like paper and pencil, writing it down. So you have clarity and you're looking at it. There's, lots of refocusing kinds of strategies. But for me, I think the bigger picture that's really important is to really believe that it's all part of your life story and, allowing yourself to learn and grow. We know that people who are resilient embrace the opportunity to get better when they run into challenge. And sometimes life gives you a little bit more challenge than you were anticipating, but spending some time reflecting on how you can get better as a player and as a person through it, I think is a great place to start.
Those are great tips and strategies, Adrienne. Thanks very much. I'm glad this is recorded because I think I'll use a few of those as well. That's our initial foray into this. Before we wrap up, anybody have any additional things or points that they just want to bring up?
I think just getting back to your comment about the holidays coming up, I think looking at, there are a lot of pressures to do things that, either really bring you joy or really drain you. And depending on who you are, you could see the same scenario very differently. So I think just taking stock, like Adrienne said, what fills your tank and also what empties it. So if over the holidays, your calendar is full of things that drain you and take your energy, it's not going to feel like much of a holiday. So building in some times to actually do the things that fill your tank, which could be completely different. For one person, socializing and being in big groups of people might be really invigorating and might be just what you've been missing while you've been away from family. For another person, that might be really stressful and really draining, and there's only so much you can do. So I think, just taking stock of what works for you, what drains you, what brings you energy, and making sure that over the holidays, you take breaks to do the things that do fill your tank.
Thanks, Dallas. Anything from your perspective, Brian or Jason?
I think as a takeaway, as the members that are watching this, to understand that there's resources available. There's people that want to listen. There's people that want to talk. And if it isn't, Adrienne had said something earlier, specifically about doing what is comfortable for you. If there's something that's not comfortable for you, but you want to talk about it, bring that to the association. What we're doing as we look to build this program out, it's being built out by the members for the members that want to use it. And I think that there isn't a shortage of avenues. If you look at the creation of the Academy in its entirety, it was the reason it's been so successful is because it was built from the guidance of the members that are now using it. And I would say this part of the program is no different. And just to understand, it doesn't matter the time of the year in the off season or not, but there's a resource and there's somebody through these programs that are willing to and able and wanting to talk at any time.
Okay, thanks very much, Jason or Adrienne. Anything closing out?
Jason, anything?
I'll just jump in and use that as an opportunity to ensure that all of our members that are taking the time to watch this, via CFLPA.com, you can access LifeWorks. If you've not gained your login to that platform, you can absolutely reach out to either Academy at CFLPA.com or me directly at j.langby at CFLPA.com. That is a 24/7 online platform that you can access via text, phone call. But certainly, if you want to escalate and go further beyond that, it is also an initial gateway to put you in touch with somebody if you do have an emergency that's at hand right now. So that's just my plug for our opportunities at hand. But hopefully, we've got more coming down the pipeline as well.
Good. Thanks. Adrienne?
I think I'm just going to start by saying that I really sense care and compassion. That's one of the wonderful things about this league. I think that for the members that are watching, I think that you can tell from the individuals that are talking is that they really want to do whatever they can to keep you guys well. So I think that it seems like a very great place to reach out to. And I think that you're in good hands. So I definitely would encourage you to do it. And I think for myself, all emotions are good. Be curious and compassionate and be kind to yourself. And, human performance is that's why people love sport. It's human performance, and it's partly about being physically well, but also mentally well. And when you take the time to pay attention to the mental part of your humanity, as Dallas said, there's a lot of really positive impacts on your performance as well.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to participate in this. And for those of you who are watching, from all of us, at the CFL PA Academy and Dr. Toogood and Dallas, a wonderful holiday where you take care of yourself and your family, friends, cut yourself some slack, give yourself some forgiveness, and fill your tank with some of the messages that I heard from today. So from all of us to yours, wherever you are across the world, have a wonderful holiday season. And can we ask Adrienne and Dallas to come back for a part 2 in the new year?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'd love to.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.